this. Okay, and I want to welcome all of you to today's session. My name is Mike Aoki. I'll be the host for today's session, and it's really focused in terms of looking at how ChatGPT revolutionizes customer experience. So we'll focus on that. As a quick little icebreaker as well, I know a few of you have done this, but if you haven't already, please type in your first name and what city you're based out of in the chat window. Okay, the chat window again in the Zoom screen is at the very bottom of the screen. There's a little button there in the center called chat. Click on that, gives you a pop-up screen. Just type in your first name and also what city you're based out of. And if you can as well, please change as well where it's addressed to from host and panelist to everybody, so everybody can see where you're from as well. Also, feel free to go and write in any questions you want to ask about. We'll have a couple of Q&As during the next hour, so feel free to write your questions in advance, okay? And if we haven't gotten to it, I'll have a chance to go and ask our wonderful panel here those questions as we go through. So again, I want to welcome everybody here. We've got a lot of folks here from the GTA. It's the Greater Toronto Area Contact Center Association, so that makes sense. We also have folks in here as well from the United States, and as well, we've had people in the past attend as well from overseas. So I want to welcome all of you here. And I'm seeing different cities out here all across Canada and the US as well. Okay, so different places in the US and Canada. So welcome aboard as well for today's session. And I just want to introduce our panel. And we've got an amazing panel here as well. Lots of great information to go and share as well. So I want to welcome Neil as well from sunny Florida. Okay, Miramar, Florida, closest major cities, Fort Lauderdale. That helps with geography for that. Nigel as well from Toronto, or just north of Toronto up there. And then Sonia as well from Toronto. And myself based in Mississauga, just west of Toronto. So pretty heavy Canadian contingent. And Neil as well, you're an honorary Canadian for the next hour. Okay, so you're there for us.
Well, I wouldn't say honorary. This is the Canadian city of Fort Lauderdale.
Oh, well, there you go.
Canadians down here, we're part of the family.
That's true too, because a lot of us go down there for the winter. So you see a lot of Canadian plates down there in Florida. All right, perfect. So, and again, we're going to focus today looking in terms of ChatGPT and really look at this from an ops perspective, so an operational perspective. Okay, really focused on that and what it does. Now, one of the first questions, and just to give us a baseline here to kind of level set for today, is what is ChatGPT? And also other advanced AIs that are out there. It's interesting. I actually typed into ChatGPT, the actual website, the online AI. I just typed in there, how would you explain yourself? Okay. And this is what it came back with. The text that you see here on screen is literally what the ChatGPT AI gave as a response back. So I'll give everybody here a chance to go and take a look at that. I mean, one more comment about that, then we'll start asking some questions of the panel. So again, looking in terms of what ChatGPT means and what it does. And just a couple of quick differentiators here for you, just to kind of mention this, because I know a question comes out sometimes about, how are these new fancy advanced AIs different from previous chatbots? And one of the things just to set a baseline for us is that I know, contact centers have been using chatbots for years. And typically it's, the chatbot itself, a very, sort of last generation one would, scan an inbound customer email or chat message, look for certain keywords matched up against a database, and then give cut and paste answers from a knowledge base or an answer base of some kind. And those answers were written by a human being. And it would the AI would just simply cut and paste that one human written, answer and put that in an email and then send it off to a customer. ChatGPT though, and all these advanced AIs, new generation that have been rolled out early this year, they're a little different in the sense that they will actually scan the email and not just look for chat messages or keywords, but will also actually analyze all the words that are there, using natural language processing to look for deeper meanings and how those different words, not a word in isolation, but how they all link together, and then actually look in terms of its knowledge base and come up with answers. And actually, if it has to, piece together bits and pieces from different knowledge base articles and arrange it in a way that's different and unique for every customer and write it in a way that's very naturally sounding. So it doesn't sound robotic. So it's a really quite advanced AI. And I just want to give everybody that opportunity to learn about what that is and why that's different. And now let's take a look in terms of why it's so important. And I just want to ask different questions too. And thank you again, all three of you, for being here on the panel. Sonia, I'm going to ask you a question, okay, which is, how is this new emerging technology, all these advanced AIs that we're hearing about, how does it change in the landscape of contact centers? What do you think of that?
Thanks. I think just taking back a bit of a, walk down the memory lane, I think we can all agree that it's been over 2 decades now that the customer experience journey and customer expectations started to shift. And with the introduction of ATMs and, self-serve checkouts and whatever the case might be. But then something really amazing happened in 2010, and it was the introduction of these. all of a sudden, everyone was walking around with a mini computer in their hands. And I remember, because I spent years in the contact center, but also many years in the outsourcing and sourcing world. And I remember in 2011 looking for app developers as a sheer response to the customer expectations and what it is that the customers were actually looking to do with the new technology they have in their hands. And everyone started realizing that customers are now changing their behavior. They prefer convenience, getting things done on their own time at the convenience of their home, their office, whatever the case might be. They wanted that instant gratifications that they weren't getting from the contact centers. They wanted to be able to add, remove stuff from the mini computer they're walking around with, and they started to prefer no human contact. Now, is it because of the contact center reputation with the long hold times? I don't know, but whatever the case might be, that was probably around the same time that a lot of organizations figured that, hey, we have to meet these new demands. These new behaviors are changing the way we do business. And companies started focusing on digital strategies, customer effort reduction, implementation of chatbots and self-serve options, and all in the effort to offload the call centers, offload the call volumes that are coming into the call centers and provide customers with that need for instant gratification and ability to control their own accounts at the palm of their hands. So the winning strategy really started shifting from competing on price, competing on product, to really competing on customer experience as a sheer response to the customer experience journey that was evolving, and it has been for quite some time. So how does this really change the contact centers? I think, and we kind of see it happening already, the contact centers became the escalations. They were only dealing with escalation calls because customers would take care of any transactional stuff that they need to take care of on their own, and that's always the preference. But if they are looking to speak to a human, it is by pure definition, it is an escalation. So contact centers and the skill set that we are looking to hire in the contact center right now has also changed. And it's, omni-channel communication. It's not enough that you are just able to speak to a customer, but you need to be able to write, speak, and, respond to emails, respond to whatever the case might be in the chats. But also empathy. I think the focus has really shifted, where I think before it was kind of bums in seats. That was the term that we used. It is now we need people that are able to think critically. They're able to act with urgency in a capacity, in a consulting capacity, not in a transactional capacity, because all the transactional stuff would have been taken care of by the technology that we have. But I think empathy was the #1 skill that all of a sudden everyone was looking to do. Because again, if the customer is looking to speak to a person, by the pure definition of that call, it is an escalation that requires, human touch that, technology cannot provide at this point.
Right. That's a really good point, Sonia. I love how you differentiate that. It's a really great explanation about how things are evolving, with this as well. And, people talk about ChatGPT and these other advanced AIs as being this really groundbreaking thing, which it is. But, it's really good to have that context, right, about where we've been and how, for those that have been in the industry for a long time, how much things have changed, with all the technology. And I love what you said about how now by definition, it's an escalation if it goes to a human, which is really good. And I know, Nigel, a question for you, and if you want to share this story with the group as well, but you mentioned that you used ChatGPT and your own role in terms of, in this case, being like a customer, basically trying to find an answer. You used ChatGPT to find a solution when your son actually clogged the toilet at home. And, how did ChatGPT, how did it help you find the right solution when you were the customer?
Yeah, and I think even bridging off a little bit of what Sonia said, the way I think of, I guess, the difference of how ChatGPT is changing the world is that before I would use chatbots as a frontline technology that I would deploy, where ChatGPT seems to span across all the teams and has an impact in all these different ways. And the way that we use it oftentimes is to make decisions a lot faster. Before, if I was using Google, that would present me hundreds of pages. I then need to make decision-making power in terms of where am I going to go? What am I going to give credit to? ChatGPT boils all that down to a single command line and provides back a response that you can action on very quickly. So for example, and as I mentioned, I've used it in a lot of creative ways. At times when I've been a little too tired, bored, lazy, what have you, I've used it to create exciting games that I've deployed with my kids, where I've said, hey, create this fun adventure game around the house where we can do some scavenger hunts, where it boils all that information down instantly and provides me a step-by-step guide of things that I could do. The example you talked about specifically, though, was my wife and I know who's on the call, she experienced this with me. Some of you with young kids have had clogged toilets, and very, very bad ones, to the point where my wife and I were basically at our wits' end. It was a whole day of dealing with it, and I was about ready to sort of hang it up and call in the plumber to say, we're just gonna give this call it defeat. But I said, let's give it one more shot. Let's give ChatGPT a chance, because it was just coming into our purview. And so I basically typed in what we tried, what we'd done, and it gave me one further option that said, this might be one of your best chances for a really difficult clog. Lo and behold, boom, flushed it out. So what it was able to do, and I think the value there was that it was able to take all the different steps that I've already tried. It would know sort of some of the impacts or the inputs that would cause those things, and then be able to provide me the next best step. Where that would have taken me probably an hour or two to go through all the different websites to find that information and piece it together to decide what my next step was. So that's really what I see, Mike, is, and you can use it in so many ways. It's just taking that, what I would describe as, it's when you can feel your brain saying, maybe here's a good example. When you're sitting there at night and you have to send an email reply back to somebody and you say, oh, my brain's just a little too tired for that. I'm going to leave it for tomorrow morning. That work effort is what I think ChatGPT takes care of perfectly. Yeah, I can basically say, here's a bunch of the things I need to say. Could you make it sound really polite, clean, and the way that I want it to? Just like the email I sent you last night, Mike. So anyway, that's I think the just budding into some of the creative use cases that we can start to deploy with.
Right. Well, and I love what you said, Nigel, as well. Just a key point that you made was about the speed of decision making, and the fact that rather than doing a Google search and having to read 10 different links in there and judge them all against each other, ChatGPT, other AIs, they can actually synthesize all of that into one clean statement you can actually act on and find things you hadn't thought of. And as well, being able to be such a big time saver as well, in terms of doing that. So again, some key things there that I loved. We've got some really great questions coming in too. So we'll do a question and answer period roughly halfway through in terms of being able to look at those. Neil, I want to ask you one question as well before we get to there, which is, and I know you're looking in terms of Callzilla as well, which is a really, pretty big, BPO, right? Pretty big third-party contact center. What should you and your leadership do or did to, decide upon before installing an advanced AI like ChatGPT? What are some of the criteria that are there? Because I know we've got a lot of VPs, senior VPs on the line that actually run big contact centers. So what's your advice to them?
Yeah, my answer is going to be, it's not necessarily going to be a ChatGPT specific answer. It's an answer more tailored on change management. What do you want to achieve? I think you start any of these processes by asking questions. And you have to make sure you ask the right question. You don't do ChatGPT just because it's popular and everyone says you got to do it. By the way, I know of organizations that do that. We've seen it. Some of them are our clients. We've also fallen into that same trap of everyone's doing it. Well, we should be doing it too. And that's definitely will not lead to success. There is an element of change management that's required, asking the right questions so you understand what is your north? What are you doing? What are you trying to resolve, and what are you attempting to achieve out of it? Are you trying to reduce cost? Are you trying to supplant humans that you either can't hire or don't hire well? Are you trying to replace technology that you may not be good at using or may not have a budget at, to go out and get a full suite of omni-channel contact center, and you're just trying to go a cheap route? There's lots of things you need to think through first. Start with the questions. What are the questions you're trying to answer, and the problems you're trying to resolve? And I think it's always good to have a good sense of metrics. What are the metrics? How do you guide and define success? Is it cost reduction? If so, how do you define what your cost per contact, or your average speed of answer, or your ability to resolve? Lots of different traditional contact center metrics that are not going away just because you have ChatGPT. I would argue that they might even apply more, but you just have to be very clear on what metrics apply to your specific use case and what those specific numbers should be before, during, and hopefully after.
Good. Yeah, and I love that advice, Neil, as well. Don't just jump on the bandwagon, actually think through what you want to accomplish, just like with any other business decision, which is so key as well. And also, Nigel and Sonia, I see you nodding your heads to this. And I'll just throw it open to all three of us here in terms of what are some things in terms of, as we look in terms of the impact that it can have, what are some things to be mindful of? I mean, I know, Neil, you mentioned the idea about budgets, for instance, and metrics. What else should we be mindful of in terms of looking at, bringing ChatGPT into our contact centers?
Just because something sounds confident doesn't mean it knows what it's talking about. And that's the risk, right? Where when you give your trust into a tool that's going to make decisions for you very quickly, there's factors that go into that. Is it right is one thing. Is it aligned to your decision-making process would be another thing. Where I've asked it to spit out certain code for me. I'm developing like a Docker container, asking it to spit out code, and it looks beautiful, far better formatted than I would ever put together, especially in that time. But when you try to run it, there's inherent errors because the syntax is wrong or the full understanding of what we're trying to do there was wrong. And then in addition to that, it just because it's providing me a verbal answer doesn't necessarily mean it's pulled all the right sources. So I think there's an element of criticalness you have to apply when you're receiving this information. But what it does is it arrives you at, I guess, considerations a lot faster. And that's the utility I see.
Good.
How about you, Sonia?
I think I mentioned this once in one of our calls before, but to me, ChatGPT is kind of like what blockchain was 15, 20 years ago. Everyone is talking about it. Someone in the chat said it's a new shiny thing. And it's true, like that's what it is. But I don't think that anyone has really wrapped their mind around how do we use it? How do we best utilize it? And what benefits is it going to bring to us? And 100% transactional stuff, it will take care of it. Those are the boring jobs that no one wants to do anyways, right? But how do you take it into a strategy? Can it really replace the strategy of the organization? I don't think it's there yet. And to your point, Nigel, it still requires a lot of critical thinking to, dissect the information, to figure out the sources that the information is being pulled from, and to see if it is aligned with the direction that your organization wants to go. So I think it's in very, very early stages where it is right now, which is why I'm comparing it to blockchain 15, 20 years ago. Does it have a potential? Absolutely. I think it will change the landscape of a lot of businesses. Probably not right away. Like it will take some time before we are actually there. And being in the role that I'm in right now, I see all of these emerging technologies, and there's so many startups and so many different cool new things that came out just in the last, I don't know, let's say 5, 10 years. Not all of them are successful. All of them are shiny new things that people jump on, but then you kind of take it back, you digest it, and you figure out, okay, maybe it is not something that will actually produce the results that it's saying that promising at this point because of X, Y, and Z. So I think to kind of narrow it down, I don't think ChatGPT will replace human jobs. I'm just going to put it out there. There is still going to be a requirement for a human connection, whether it's in the call centers or internally, but it will take away all of the transactional stuff that no one wants to do anyways. But it will take time. It's not going to be an overnight thing.
Okay, and that's a really good point as well. And I just want to do a quick little audience survey. So just launch this poll so everyone can see it on screen. So again, we've got like 51 people here in attendance. And so you feel free to go and vote on this. Are you already using ChatGPT or another advanced AI, not just a basic chatbot, but a more advanced one that actually generates language in your contact center right now? And I'm just kind of curious to see from the group, 51 people here all across North America, what the results are.
Yeah, it would be very interesting to see what the results would be. Sorry, Neil, I cut you off there. I was part of the beta testing for ChatGPT back in Q4 of last year. And, that thing is phenomenal. And I think it's only got better since then. And I tested it on stupid stuff. Like I would ask for recipes. I would ask for travel advice, with, what to see when you go to Paris. And I would ask in different languages too, just to see if I can trick it. And this thing always came back with the right language and the right response. So it is kind of it's creepy and awesome at the same time what it is able to do. And I would be very much interested to see if it is being used in call centers already.
Yeah, well, I'll share what the results are. I've got most people have voted now. I'll give it another 15 seconds or so and then share the results. And also, Neil, you were about to say something, so go ahead if you want to as well.
Yeah, I was just going to comment that several things. Yes, this technology is far from perfect. And I think that anyone would say that they are an expert in this. I think the recommendation I would give to the audience here is run fast. No one's an expert in this. Even someone quoted it here in the chat that even the CEO of OpenAI has concerns about the product that they've developed, right? This is not perfect. It's evolving. It's a very shiny bullet right now. Who knows if it's going to be here long term? We all think that it probably will. By the way, the things that ChatGPT does, they've already existed mostly in the contact center as today. chatbot technology, for example, or voice bot technology, they've existed for many years leading up to this. This is just a different version of it, maybe a bit faster, a bit broader, of course, but it's already existed. So while I would answer that I'm not personally using ChatGPT yet in the contact center, we're utilizing the technology to provide answers for customers in an automated fashion through chatbots. And most importantly, I think we're trying to improve employee experience or frontline agent experience by getting them answers using chatbot technology to make their searches and queries a lot faster, a lot more complete, a lot more frictionless, so that the agents have to put forth a lot less effort. Then, with the impact of those things, it reduces time, hopefully reduces customer satisfaction and resolution when we can do all those things. So the underlying technologies, they've existed, but now we have a much shinier, much louder toy to look at and to play with in the marketplace.
Right, and that makes sense too. I just want to read some chats that are here coming in. Amanda Trainer actually typed in, yes, that's it. Neil, very much in agreement with you about speeding things up and being able to find answers faster as well. Kevin typed in, just had to propose some interview questions, saved a lot of time, because you can just query in there, what are 10 common interview questions? It'll spit it back within seconds, as opposed to having to draft them yourself. Amanda made a great comment as well, agreeing with Sonia, that we're seeing more, from a perspective, seeing more contact center customers promoting high-touch engagement from their agents. So get rid of all the boring stuff, make it a lot easier as well. And she had a comment as well about she asked it to help her bake a cake. It worked, but yes, creepy. The cake was good though. So, and some of the ChatGPT responses can be a little eerie sometimes. I've seen that too. And Roy also said as well, but it's ChatGPT is the big shiny new thing that's out there. Now I know Amanda and Micah, you also asked questions. I'll ask the panel that during the Q&A period in a few minutes. For that, Melissa also typed in as well so that she agrees with you, Neil. For more of us on the support side in the contact center, great to go and use ChatGPT or other AIs like that to help agents find answers and resources, which is really good as well. And Lorraine Williams typed in, asked it to help me with a mission statement, a goal statement, that kind of stuff. And I was struggling to put together. It really helped a lot. And I just had to tweak it a bit. So cut your build time in half. Nigel, getting to your point about great for first drafts, great for initial research. Just make sure you vet it first before you finally let it run with that as well. And in terms of doing that. So again, some really key things that are out there. Some other great chats, some other great comments and questions there that we'll get to in a moment. And I just want to share the results of the survey as well, so we can all see this. The final vote, the final tally was 32% of people said, yes, they're already using ChatGPT or another advanced AI in their contact center. So 1/3 are, 2/3 aren't. Okay, in terms of doing that. I'll just ask, any comments about that?
I'm wondering if the 30% that they are using it, is it all for the internal communication or is it external? I mean, applies so the customers can engage with the technology on behalf of the agent. Because I think there was one of the comments or questions that we had on the chat as well around the whole privacy issue, and there are so many depending on the sector that you're in. I mean, I'm in banking, so there's only so much you can actually share without validating all of the customer information to ensure that you are talking to the right person. So it would be really interesting to see, like, if the 30% that are using it, is it all for internal issues such as, give me 10 best interviews question, or, give me ability to, pull from the internal training information about how do I respond to customer when they ask about X, Y, and Z. Yeah.
I don't think there's many companies deploying it on the front line yet that I've seen. At least there's some that are dabbling in it.
Yeah.
But in hearing both of your perspectives, I'm definitely more bullish, I think, in terms of the impact this is going to have. And the difference I see, because I've seen a lot of shiny balls come through the contact center as well over the last 15 years. And the difference with this one is the utility I see that spans very wide. And like, I was definitely part of sort of that first golden era of chatbots where we had tons of vendors coming through that were all selling, I'd say, the same sort of snake oil of, it's great, it's going to solve all of your customer service problems. But then when you have a chance to test them, their recognition of intents were very, very low. And the amount of work that it took to upcode those was very high. Where I think what we're starting to get to is a sweeter spot where I can literally just point a tool like this to a knowledge database and start to generate out a lot of the work that would have taken before, much less the fact that I'm seeing utility on our support teams in multiple different use cases and in my personal life. So for me, that to me says that there's something a little different here, that there's something that's going to prevail much stronger than just the initial chatbot technology did, or even blockchain. Because when I think of blockchain, like, that had a small impact from my cryptocurrency, I guess, sidebar type of life, but I'm using ChatGPT constantly. And I see it being either a very strong complement to Google in the future in terms of my day-to-day use, or supplanting it. It'll just depend on, I guess, how those two evolve. But yeah, like when I hear, I don't consider it a shiny ball. I definitely think it's changing the way that we work. And even when I think of my team in the last week, probably 4 or 5 different use cases we've deployed it for. And don't get me wrong, when we talk about ethical bias, when we talk about the worry of the decisions that it's making, those things you absolutely have to worry about. But the time I think that it saves greatly overvalues with those risks. You just have to be careful.
Okay, that's a good point, Nigel. I like that. And I just want to mention a couple of comments people made. Maudrey, and I hope I'm saying that correctly, said that I use it for internal communication, composing employee letters, and responding to customer disputes. So some use cases there. Melissa typed in as well, internal only, as being an example of that. So just a couple of things there. I've got a second poll as well that might shed some light on this in terms of what you can or cannot use it for. So I'll just share this with you as well. I'll launch a second poll. And there's a number of possible answers here. Question is, what are your plans for utilizing advanced AI such as ChatGPT in your contact center operations? And you can vote for any of the things that you see here on screen, as many as you want to. Okay, some common applications there. You can also type in other if you're using it for other things as well. But just to give us an idea in terms of what are some things you can do with it. And also, Neil, Nigel, and Sonia, you share ideas as well about what you can do with it or what you have done with it in the past.
I just think it's awesome that comment that we have from Roy Atkinson about Fishbowl survey recently found that nearly 70% of employees who are using ChatGPT at work haven't told their bosses. I think that's awesome.
It's interesting. Why do you think that is? I mean, it's such a great tool, yet 70% of people don't want to admit they're using it.
Security, probably. Lack of comfort, lack of understanding of the tool. There's going to be, depends on who the situation is, but like for us, if we're putting anything through there, I've asked the team, genericize anything we put through ChatGPT. You don't know who has it, where it's stored.
Yeah.
So use it to get the quick decision made and then put in all of our private information after the fact. But that would probably be one big concern.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
also fear if you go and tell your boss that you're using ChatGPT to do your assignments, and your boss is going to look at you and say, well, do I need you, or can I just go to ChatGPT? There was a great example here. I think it was from, was it Lucinda? I think was her name a little bit earlier. She was Lorraine, who was looking to create a mission statement, goal statement. And she was struggling with it, which by the way, many of us do. And many of us don't like to write. And so this is a natural tool for that kind of thing. ChatGPT, I guess, spit out something that she utilized. Doesn't mean, by the way, that there was a great mission statement or goal statement. It just means that she had something. She had a response to her assignment. I think there's some danger there in just accepting something that the tool spits back at you. It doesn't mean it's good quality. It's mission. It doesn't mean it passes the smell test.
Yeah, that's a great point, Neil, as well, because it writes in such an authoritative fashion. When you read the response that ChatGPT gives, it sounds so authentic and so, well researched, but it can be factually incorrect. I actually typed in GPT, who is Mike Aoki. It gave me back an answer which was pretty good, sounded really impressive, was factually incorrect in a couple of spots, like dead wrong. That wasn't me. So, but it sounds convincing. So again, it could be tricky to go and use, when it comes up. I just want to share the results of the poll, by the way, the results of the survey. So you can see the answers here on screen. Out of everyone who voted, it was interesting. The most popular answer, 81%, was help agents with advanced knowledge-based searches. So again, some examples that you gave about that. And also the second most popular one was analyze contact center KPIs. So again, you can load KPIs into it and ask for analysis, and it will give you insights to that as well. So some popular uses that are in there. Okay. Interestingly enough, have advanced AI directly answered chats and emails was 50% or less in terms of plans for that. So much more internal than external use.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I think that's probably where we will see ChatGPT the most. It's the internal use to help us gain the efficiencies internally around how we conduct our business.
I'm meeting with a vendor Monday that claims that they got it. So I'm very keen and interested to see, because if we can stand up a bot in less than a day, that'll be paradigm shifting for us. And I'll happily connect with you guys after the fact. But I'm very keen to understand what vendors offer it. I just haven't seen a lot out there yet. And even like in pushing some of the major players in natural language, and I'll just mention a few: Microsoft, Google, Amazon haven't heard deep plans. I know Google has Bard, but I haven't seen anything in terms of how they're monetizing it and selling it to me from a consumer standpoint. So anyway, I think that part of it's the solutions that exist today, and also paired with the trepidation around, like we've already talked about, ethics, security, all those components that I think are inherent in it.
Yeah. Well, there's some great questions too, talking of ethics and some of the impacts, in the chat box as well. So I want to share those with you. Okay, some really great comments that are out there. So it's a chance for a first Q&A session and a lot of great questions that are in there. So I'm just going to go back to some of the earlier ones to start off with. So mention security. And again, whichever one of you would like to answer this, please feel free to. This is from Micah as well at Procedure Flow. Would love to hear how contact centers are approaching LLM security in terms of inputting private company data into things like ChatGPT, again, the privacy issue, or products that integrate with and use ChatGPT in the back end. And has anyone found solutions that enable the use of powerful LLM while addressing those security concerns? And I'll just ask whoever wants to go and field that question, Sonia, Neil, or Nigel.
Maybe I won't directly answer that question, but maybe I'll open up to Nigel or Neil. But I do want to point out one thing from the sourcing perspective, because third-party risk management, as a result of all of these new emerging cool technologies that we have never seen before in a very, very short period of time, the third-party risk management has been elevated to a whole new level, because information security and cybersecurity have become the biggest threat to any organization. And I think probably just in the last couple of years, it has kind of gone to a whole new extreme level, because it's a very lucrative ransom business that is happening right now with the cybersecurity, information security. So implementation of taking on any new vendors and any new shiny new things that they're proposing, it comes with a lot of risk, and there's a whole bunch of extra layers of due diligence that organizations are performing to ensure that these vendors are actually viable ones. They're not the ones that it's going to be the weakest link in their supply chain that will take down entire organization. So information security, cybersecurity, fourth party is something that we are looking at, sometimes even fifth and sixth, depending. And that's basically looking at your vendors and what are they doing and how are they actually feeding into whatever the vendor is providing to your organization. So anything that has to do with any technology implementation, when it comes to security, it has really been elevated to a whole new level that I haven't seen before. So I will leave it to Nigel and Neil if you guys want to talk about the ChatGPT specific, but I just wanted to put that out there because it is quite concerning.
Yeah, a really great point, Sonia, about that. A lot of risk, involved in that. Nigel and Neil, what are your thoughts?
So we're talking about risk. We're governed by many of the certifications and protocols in place here. SOC 2 compliance, PCI compliance. If you're dealing with healthcare, HIPAA compliance. Those are the things that keep us up at night. But I don't feel comfortable yet that ChatGPT is compliant. I don't know them to be, or know the technology to be or not be, but it seems to me inherently that there are very critical risks as you send out information, send out requests. I think someone earlier said here, Micah Peterson said, it violates company policies because you're sending info off to be training data for OpenAI, which could result in private company data showing up in public searches later. Mm-hmm. In the context center, those words scare the bejesus out of me. Yeah. Sorry to use that term, but that's stuff that should keep us all up at night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really good points on that. And Nigel, I see you're nodding your head. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I definitely don't have we're not putting anything from a private information, company information through that tool for the exact reasons Neil outlined. Don't know where it's going, don't know where it's stored, don't know how it's going to be used. So for that reason, you have to keep things very vanilla. And I think that keeps it sort of cut off at the knees in terms of the amount of value it can provide us at this stage. Mm-hmm. And like I say, I'm keenly interested to understand what other solutions are being developed to help keep that knowledge and information private and secure. And shout out to Micah too. I saw you just sent me something over LinkedIn in terms of some companies to look at. So thank you, buddy.
Okay, good. All right, perfect. Thanks for that. A question from Mayar is, what is the weak point of ChatGPT? So what's the weak point of ChatGPT?
A few, like no image, no ability for it to see. So if you're talking just like how I can use it use case wise and where it's limited, it's great in verbally describing things or textually describing things, but when I need to take it to image or sound for anything multimedia rich, it doesn't really have much to do there. And I think I've already called out the other parts from my perspective are, can you trust the answer? And can I trust the biases that have been coded into it from an ethical standpoint?
Mm-hmm. Okay, good comment as well. Sonia, Neil, any thoughts about this?
My comment, there's not much I can add on top of what Nigel said. I fully agree that's the list. It just made me think as he was saying it though, have you ever been in an Uber or a Lyft or a ride share service and the driver is an absolute moron? They don't know where they're going. All they do is they depend on the GPS to get them there. And you may be going to a very common destination like the airport or the beach, but the driver can't for the life of them get you to those places because they're so stuck to the screen and so stuck to following the instruction. I worry from an ethical standpoint, but also just a general practical standpoint that we're going to become beholden to these things and become further unskilled and less aware and maybe even lazy.
Mm-hmm.
I love that the earlier example that we talked about, that ChatGPT came up with a mission statement and a goal statement. That's wonderful. It doesn't mean that they're good.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Those are the worries for me.
Right. Okay. Because we could become too over dependent on technology like that Uber driver in doing that. Okay. And then Sonia, your thoughts?
This just reminded me of a conversation that I had not too long ago about the generational changes that we are seeing. And, ChatGPT kind of sparked the conversation and it evolved somewhere where I didn't see it go. And that is the metaverse. Is that the next thing? Like, are we changing everything because we now have Gen Zs that are, to Neil's point, very much, they trust their phones more than they trust anybody else. But then, also they're now wanting to, because they don't want that human touch. They don't want that human connection. They want to, do it on their own time. They want to change stuff on their own time in the convenience of their own home. Is metaverse the next big thing that ChatGPT will feed into? And how do we respond to that? And again, I kind of look back to, it will be industry specific, I know, but, I'm looking from the banking standpoint. Oh my God, how do you respond? Because of the ethical issue, because of the privacy concern, because of all of the other stuff we just talked about. But where is this? I just think it's crazy times that we live in. It's exciting and creepy at the same time. But I think because you're recording this meeting, if someone was to play 10 years from today, I wonder if they would think we are all silly for thinking the way it is, because the world's going to look so much different 10 years from today.
Yeah, that's a good point. Even 10 months from today, we don't know the way this is advancing.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a really good point as well, but just the transitions and the generational impacts, which I love you brought up as well. Being the parent of a Gen Z kid, again, very different than when I was a kid. So a lot of changes there as well. Yeah. I'm going to pivot a little bit on this question, which was one from Afshan. And Afshan, thank you for writing this, which is thinking now about from the customer's viewpoint. Okay, she would love to hear your opinion on how you would even know if a customer is using ChatGPT to go and talk to one of your agents about their issue. Because some customers out there might be using ChatGPT to create the perfect answer, okay, or the perfect question to try to get what they want, and then clicking that into a message to your agent. So how can you tell? What do you do about that? What do you think about that? Customers using that as a tool.
I guess. I don't know. I don't really have an opinion per se. Like if a customer wants to use ChatGPT to come in and they get the answers they need faster with less burden on their day, great. There's going to be a pretty high level of coding and build they'll have to do from a client perspective to have that as an inbound to contact centers. I'd see it more from like a nefarious practices perspective, like leveraging it to try and socially engineer your contact center from an authentication standpoint or something like that, maybe.
Okay.
I don't know if if a client can use it, and it's not burdening our capacity, I'd say why not?
Okay, all right, fair enough then. All right.
I don't know, do you guys disagree? I might be misinterpreting the question.
I think maybe the question was if the agent is using ChatGPT to respond to the customer.
No, the other way, if the customer is using it.
So, if the customer is using it,
to write a response.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll give you an example. A customer may go and say, type in a ChatGPT, please write an email to send to my telecom company to get a refund for last month's cell phone bill. Okay. And I'll write something out that hopefully sounds really great, maybe quote some laws, regulations, could or could not be accurate in terms of doing that. And then the customer just cuts and pastes that into an email and fires it off to their telecom company. Okay. So I guess the question actually it's asking is, how can you tell, first of all, if a customer is doing that? And what do you think the impact is, in terms of coming into your contact center?
comes from that person's email address. Doesn't matter who wrote it. And it can be the same thing as if they got their mom to write it for them.
Yeah.
They're
Okay.
putting that forward as their voice, and I will take that as it is. And like kind of the same risk as if they just researched on Google and came up with their own opinion on what they needed. I don't see that as a risk. It's more of like there's crazy volumes coming in from one person that they couldn't do on their own, for sure.
Right.
I'd have an issue with that.
Okay. So write 10 emails I can send to my company, and then
they
fire them off one after the other. Okay.
Now we're tipping the scales.
Okay. So that's one thing though, with automation, speed of response, and also accuracy. Okay, good. All right, perfect.
That's what these tools are doing. They're automating decision making to an extent, and it's going to, I think, to the point of Sonia, it's going to make us all dull. But I don't see much technology making us sharper.
Okay. All right. And Neil, you're about to say something there?
I was gonna say, I think the customer is entitled to do whatever the heck they want, at least today, if they want to use ChatGPT, and I don't think it's our responsibility to find out, are they using ChatGPT or not? But I think the other way around, are we beholden, are we responsible for disclosing to customers that we're using ChatGPT, that they may be interacting with a non-human? That's maybe an ethical question. I think it maybe just be good practice to disclose. I think that's a fair thing. By the way, I also, some of you may know, I operate a contact center with live agents that are not in the United States or in North America. So that's another, do we have an ethical obligation to disclose that we're not onshore? Some people say yes, some people say no. I think the same argument applies. Do we have the moral obligation, the ethical responsibility to disclose that? It's a question. I don't necessarily have the answer, but it is a question.
But it's an important question to ask, because ChatGPT does write in a very human, natural fashion. So it's really easy to look at the answers it gives back and think a person wrote that versus a computer program. So you're right, there's an ethical issue there, but do you disclose that or not? Which is important. Okay, good. Another question for you as well. Deanna wrote in, ChatGPT is an excellent language model. However, lacks enough data to give accurate answers for some extremely specific questions right now. Once ChatGPT or successors improves on the accuracy front, what do you think will be the impact in contact centers? So now putting your operations hat on, in a contact center, what do you think the impact's going to be as it gets a lot better at being accurate?
If it's accurate, I mean, the standard contact center metrics improve, right? Average time to resolve a problem, resolution or first contact resolution should, in theory, trickle down or directly be impacted. It should be reduced. You would hope that satisfaction increases, or the voice of customer metrics of the day increase satisfaction. Hopefully effort score drops. Maybe if you use NPS, that improves. That's the theory, right? But that's why I said at the beginning, I think you need to know what questions to ask first and what your data comparison, your benchmarks are, before, during, and after.
Right. Okay. Very good. And Nigel, Sonia, any thoughts about that?
No, I agree with what Neil said. Bottom two box and top two box, along with NPS, is going to be the key drivers of success and measurement of success. And if ChatGPT does come to a point where it makes it easier for internal, like I think to have it customer facing will probably be a long time for all of the stuff that we discussed. But internally, if we can make things a lot more efficient for the agents, because again, the agents are only dealing with escalations, so they do require that right accurate data right there, right then, in order to solve whatever the issue is that the customer is calling about. In theory, it should improve bottom two box and top two box scores.
Okay, good. Right, excellent. So just seeing the impact of that.
They definitely increase adoption. I think, like we're saying right now, it's everyone's dabbling, figuring out ways that they can get some value from it. The analogy in my head is, I think we're playing with the Yahoo version of the Google search engine right now. So I think it's still there's the utility there, there's value, people go there. I just don't know if we're at the model yet that's going to completely sweep and cause some very big paradigm shifts. But I believe that, to your point, as this accuracy increases, our trust in the tool increases, you're going to see a massive broad adoption of this tool, where just the same way that we say Google it and we didn't 15 years ago or 20 years ago, I think that's the type of impact and change this is going to have.
Okay, good. All right, excellent. And we've got so many questions here. I'll just go right to the second round of Q&A. We haven't even stopped the first one yet, but great questions. A couple of comments too. Paul typed in, the responses available in ChatGPT are limited to information with a cutoff year of 2021, because that was where they cut off the data as far as putting it into ChatGPT. So there'll be limitations on the data right now. And the responses can seem dated if you're asking for up-to-date stats. I actually typed in who won last year's Super Bowl 2022. It couldn't tell me because again, it cut off in 2021. So differences there. Roy typed in as well. Roy Atkinson typed in, weak point, no transparency. We can't see the sources. So critical thinking becomes very difficult. You can't always vet where they got the information from or what they're basing it on. So a challenge there. Here's a question as well. Ashan typed in about the images and video piece. Any idea of, how well do you think that will work if they start to incorporate images and video into ChatGPT?
Really
So
cool.
kind of looking ahead, if they
My
can.
wife shared an example with me last night, Mike, that I didn't even know was possible. You
Okay.
can ask it to write you Python code to create PowerPoint presentations. So it's not quite in the visual space yet, but it will write out the code that once you plug it into PowerPoint will create the visual pieces. It's not great yet, but once it gets to think of the amount of time we burn building decks. At least in my team, there's countless hours spent putting decks together. The second that I can say ChatGPT or whatever model it is, construct this, that boils a very, very arduous process down to seconds. So I see this having a major impact. Again, but it's got to bridge those pieces together, and I think there's probably a pretty long road until it becomes accurate to the point of which the quality I want it to be.
Okay, all right, good. It's a good point about that for perspective. I'm going to mention as well too, really good question here from Dan as well, which is for all of us here, what is your take using ChatGPT for analyzing language in calls? Okay, so it could answer business questions instantly, which would have taken hours of QA to analyze. So what's your take as far as analyzing language in calls or texts and chats?
I can't talk about ChatGPT in speech analytics. We utilize speech analytics technology, and I couldn't be a bigger supporter of it. But we're not using ChatGPT as the underlying driver of it. We're using all the rest of the existing technology. There's some of them are referred to in there, but I'm not aware of use cases where ChatGPT is a engine or utilized currently in speech analytics.
Okay.
Same as you, Neil. I don't know of live leveraging. We've used it for creation of different language prompts. So for things like IVR prompts, internal communications, where we, because again, just finding multilingual skill sets is a challenge. So we'll be at bare bones within our teams to accomplish that. What we'll do is we'll use, typically before we would have used Google Translate to give us a baseline, and then we'd work with a French-speaking individual to refine it to get it to the right point. We're hearing that the versions that ChatGPT gives us are miles beyond what Google Translate would give us, and the edits are minimal if anything. So I know it's way more effective. It seems to be far more accurate. But to Neil's point, it's not being leveraged in a machine yet where it's pumping out lots. It's more manual based.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can attest that the accuracy is far beyond Google Translate. Because as I said, I tested it myself in different languages just to see what it would look like. You can't compare it to Google Translate. And I think it's maybe just a matter of time before we actually do have ChatGPT as the underlying for language recognition, because it's just so much better. And, and that will kind of, have an impact on the translation services that we are using. And hopefully it will also contribute to the customer experience, because now we can service customers a lot faster in different languages.
Okay, good. So again, a very powerful potential impact, right?
Yeah.
With multi-language skills, that are there. I'll mention as well too, in terms of a QA perspective, that Roy Atkinson shared that he's seen a ChatGPT powered tool analyze a 10-minute customer agent conversation for 5 points of QA in 3 seconds. So again, and there's some data that is in the chat window for all of us if you want to take a look at that. But, again, being able to go and use these tools in terms of multi-language skills, in terms of QA perspectives, and being able to search a database or knowledge base with answers. So again, some powerful things that are there as well. A question that Ian asked was, what educational resources or organizations that you know of or feel that are considered gold standard at this early stage of the tool to get the most out of it? So are there any outside organizations, benchmarking, anything else that you read or have heard of that might help people kind of ramp up in terms of what some of the standards are?
I feel like my knowledge would be out of date even as of any reading I did this morning.
It changes so fast.
I know there's a lot of schools that are currently contemplating this because it's got some pretty major implications. I haven't heard of anything though personally, and if you do know of any, I'd love to know.
Okay, good.
I
Interesting.
think it's so early to have a gold standard, and it's changing so fast that even if something might have been considered a gold standard yesterday, it's probably very different today. And I had a very similar conversation just last week about, what's the benchmark? What are we striving to do? What was a player out there that has, conquered this and has, incorporated into their strategy? And consensus is that there's no such thing because it is still early in its in the stage that it's in.
I would recommend everyone sees Roy Atkinson's name in here. Hopefully, Roy, you're hearing this. He's involved with an organization. I think it's called the Institute for Digital Transformation, which not that familiar with, but I think they're putting out some good content. There's a collection of smart individuals. I like to follow whatever Roy's doing. And look, if you pay attention to the chat, he's come up with lots of concrete examples and success stories of things that are being done. I think, maybe it's an unofficial recommendation, but he's a source of knowledge and one that I trust.
Okay,
I'd
good.
love
Thanks,
to connect after.
Yeah, Roy's really good. I've read a lot of his stuff too. So big shout out for Roy Atkinson. Great shout out there as well. So again, one last question we'll do just to kind of summarize or finish up for today. The question is this one, which is, what's the right balance of AI-driven automation and human high-touch interaction? We've got this great AI tool, advanced AI tools coming down the pipe, but how do we balance all this off to make sure that we have the best customer and employee experience possible? And I'll just throw this out to everyone who wants to answer this one among the three of you, but what do you think is the best balance of doing that?
I think I said at the beginning, the escalations have to be dealt by a human. You cannot trust any technology to deal with the most delicate conversations that you can have between an organization and the customer. And I stand by that call centers, there's always going to be a need for call centers in a different capacity that we have them today. Call centers are becoming, sorry, I'm aging myself by calling them call centers. Contact centers, contact centers are now, consultants. The agents are now consultants. That's the capacity they're operating in. They have a whole different skill set than they did 20 years ago when, bums and seats was the term that we used for contact agents. Because now you need somebody with a whole new skill level that will be able to represent you as the front line of the organization. So, so what's the right balance? Get all of the transactional stuff, all of the boring stuff, all of the stuff that doesn't really require human connection, get it off to the technology, get it off to this digital strategy, whether it's self-serve, whether it's apps, whatever the case might be, whether it's GPT, and get the agents to only deal with the escalations, because that's when you absolutely need that human connection in order to retain the customer and hopefully, attract new customers as well.
Okay, good. And Neil, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm going to sound like a cliche and a broken record. It all depends on your organization. Each of our organizations are different. Each of us has different needs, different weaknesses, different strengths, different customer profiles, different personas, as they say. What works for one organization is not necessarily the right path for the other organization. You need to be very clear on what questions you need to ask and the answers that you're going to get, and use the data as points of comparison and benchmarks. So I'm just repeating myself.
That's okay.
Contact center methodology 101 to understand, is ChatGPT really the right thing for me? And what am I better before, during, and after? If yes, check, great, proceed, pass go and collect $200. If not, pull back, iterate, rethink it. Does it make sense to continue? If not, scrap it, throw it away, and go with a different strategy or strategies. That's the way I look at it. I'm sorry, it's not I'm not going to earn a patent for my response right here, but I think tried and true methodology and approach is what makes sense here.
Yeah, no, that's okay, Neil. Again, it's business sense, right? To go and do that. All right, perfect. And Nigel?
Yeah, I'd say building on what both have said already, it's kind of the cross section of CX and profitability. Because as an organization, I'm going to continue to push automation as far as I possibly can. But as CX starts to decline, I'm going to figure out where that sweet spot is that we can automate as much as we possibly can while the CX still remains. So I think that's about accounting for the escalations. It's about picking the right use cases, and it's highly contextual based off the industry you work in, whether you're B2B, B2C, and all of those elements. But I think that's, as organizations